Hi, this is Una. I'm the antidote to John's metalhead. This is a Revolting Podcast.
Hi, I'm John MacAskill. I am the metalhead, and welcome to the Revolting Podcast. Revolting.
Yeah.
Why revolting? Renewables, vaulting, vaults, power, revolting, and we also revolt. I want us to be, some of the topics are nerdy. They're going to be nerdy topics,
Love
right?
getting my geek on.
Yeah, so there'll be nerdy topics, but I want it to be in an engaging way for the nerds, right? Because there's some fantastic podcasts out there. We all listen to the Energy Podcast, fantastic one. So I want it to be engaging and maybe a different sort of spin on it. But I want us to see if we can try and break through to more people in the periphery of it as well, which is what David McWilliams does. Now we'll never, to get anywhere near that would be fantastic. But he breaks through. It's not economics for economists. And I don't want this to be renewables for renewables.
No,
obviously
absolutely.
that's a please come and listen to us. But it's also to try and break through. So that to me is and why now? Well, if not now, not now. When?
Yeah,
that's the simple one for me. Is if not now, then when?
I mean, for me, I'm getting asked a lot of the time, just what's going on here. Why is there such, I suppose, divisive discussions going on around energy and even politics, and what is really at the heart of this? And hopefully, we can break it down, cut through the noise, make sure we bring in some other views, just to give us the full holistic look. 30,000 feet look at this and see what other hands are at play here, because again, we're operating as an industry, we probably operate a little bit within a bubble. So how do we break out of that? Because I do think we need to see the bigger picture, but actually operationally as well, we need to break the shackles, look at things like how do we be more integrated, look at wider infrastructure, how can we align, how can we tackle things like grid and curtailment, and how do we maybe partner in with some of the wider industries to see if we can mitigate some of that, particularly around curtailment, or help ourselves out in the short term until we get those grids in place. So why now? Nothing better. And plus there's a hell of a lot of entertaining little stories going on the side. I mean, it's we'll dive into the US shortly. It's a tragedy, it's a comedy, it's something else.
Tragedy.
It's something else. Comedy. But one for a deeper discussion later on. So John, just for those listeners that don't know you, where does John come from? What's your background?
So, incredibly briefly, originally a marine engineer. I was on box boats and container ships, but then went back to university. I took 7 years to get an HND, right? So that's because I was college gaps. So 7 years, then took a postgrad. So basically, 2/3, first third of my career, or unequal thirds, was sort of industry. So basically quality, lean, production engineering, all that kind of stuff. So that was me when I was really doing engineering and managing engineers. Realized I was never going to be the best engineer. So then had the second sort of unequal third, which was learning how to do commercial stuff. So that was business development, sales and marketing director. And that was in an engineering environment and looking at industrial gases and actually offshore, the offshore sector, oil and gas. And then in 2008, I joined renewables. I came into renewables, and I've been a consultant. I've been in certification. I've been in the supply chain startup with a shipyard, spending a lot of money on monopile equipment and finding that really tough. And I've been in my current role as a consultant now for 10 years in November with the current firm. And fantastic. It's a great industry, and it's what you said earlier. It's the passion, it's the energy for it. Yeah. So, and I do a lot, and I try and advocate. So I write, I try and sort of speak on panels and stuff like that because I enjoy engaging and communicating. Yeah. And this is a really exciting next step for me. But so how did you get to that seat?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had the interest in renewables, but I worked in infrastructure. So I worked in roads and bridges and drainage and more drainage. So I was doing renewables by night when I worked in the west of Ireland. I was getting absolutely pelted by rain every evening. There was a change coming. Celtic Tiger probably helped it along. It gave me that kick just to go, it's now or never. And in 2009, I packed in my very permanent job and comfort and everything else in a tiger genuflecting economy in Ireland, and packed my bags and my car for Scotland. Okay. And
when was that?
That was in 2009. So in September, actually, I think I quit in August, and enough was enough. And I was starting university in Edinburgh, doing a master's in sustainable energy systems. And that was a catalyst for me, very much to get out of the country. I had traveled quite extensively before, lived in Australia and did short stints in the US as well. So not afraid of that factor. But I suppose 16 years on, I didn't expect myself to be still here in Scotland. For me, it was about variability and, having not a new challenge every couple of years just to keep me going. Otherwise I would get bored. And my background, I'm very much an engineer, civil environmental, UCC, give a little mention to my old friends there. But it's really been amazing transition from the infrastructure side, which is really a great sector to be in as well. Very interesting, worked with some great people. We had some amazing engineers come into our department in Cork when I was there. They moved from India. Some of the smartest individuals I've come across, and working with a multinational team has been amazing over the years. But coming into renewables, it's like the UN. You get all types of backgrounds. You get all types of...
So you're a diplomat then?
I'm a little bit of a diplomat. Our team, particularly in my first consultancy job in renewables, was like the UN. The amount of languages that were crossed on projects, the cultures, how we approach things, that's what keeps me going. So I'm a consultant by heart, I would say. I still get that, but I'm very much involved in the development side as well. I've worked for just shy of 20 years with one major consultant. Really, really enjoyed my time there and built up a business there around offshore wind in particular. It's been very good to me. Scotland's been very good to me. And I suppose that's at the heart of why I get involved in things like lobbying and really being hard on the industry at times, maybe with some critical thinking on pushback and challenge. But it's there. It's very much... it's trying to do better at heart. It's there to help, to challenge. It might seem quite harsh and critical at times, but the heart of it is very much embedded in kind of the passion for renewables and delivery.
I take my hat off on the lobbying front and with the politics, with the engagement stuff, because I would find it so difficult to hold my tongue.
It's hard.
And I can imagine.
And I've lost my tongue a few times. Don't get me wrong. I've lost my tongue more than a few times, and out of sheer frustration in some markets because they're missing the opportunity.
Yeah, I know. So frustrating.
It's really, really hard.
It's there. It's there. It's there. Can you not see that?
I mean, I'm working on an emerging market at the minute in the global south, and it's so refreshing at the minute to see the politics and see the way of working and quite aligned. Yeah. But, you see the cross-party alignment, particularly around renewables. But equally then they're leaning into the conversation on how did you do it in Europe? How are you opening up this market? How do we build the supply chain? And it's refreshing, particularly when you come back and work in the UK and the European markets at the minute, and how difficult it is and where the barriers are and where the really slam shut doors are on some of the challenges. And we have a little bit of ostrich syndrome in there. So how do we open ourselves up and remember and go back to some of those days where we were just simply curious and get on with it, get back to the basics?
100% agree with you. I sometimes think we need to also step back and look at where we've came in the more mature markets as well, because one of the things that really frustrates me, because one of the things I write about a lot and I'm really passionate about, because I was in industry, because I was in engineering, there was press operators, there was welders, there was that kind of stuff, is the potential renaissance of offshore wind. So that's one of my sort of passion areas, and not just the degree consultant, right, but actually the person in the storeroom, the forklift driver, the burger van, the taxi rank outside. That's economic. That's economic growth for me. That's the gross added value. What's the term?
GVA.
GVA. Don't want to do too much sort of letters and acronyms, but basically and the frustrating thing for me is the lack of joined up thinking from an industrial energy strategy. Now, I can be really frustrated, but actually, you look at what the current government has done and is trying to do, even though I still pull my hair out with frustrations, and then compare that back to maybe the latter part of the coalition, and into the pure conservative one, where all of a sudden it was, things were harder. They were trying to bring the ambitions down and everything else. It's night and day. So it's like frustrating, but stand back and go, okay, actually it's been worse. And as we'll explore, we're in a market that, like other industries or other cycles, you hit these sort of bubbles where everything gets excited, it collapses a bit, but that's where you get growth. Again, that's where you get birth. Yes, that's how you mature as well. So that's the other thing that we want to sort of explore. But it's fascinating. So it's that's why I get out of bed.
Yeah, I mean, totally. But I mean, it's difficult right now. We've got a turbulent market. We've got a lot of issues in the market, and I suppose just whistling through some of the. I've aged
through those. Shall we whiz through those?
Whiz through those. I think I've aged a decade.
Should we ask the team? Shall we whiz through those?
I think it's time to whiz through those.
Okay.
Yeah, is that okay?
Let's do it.
That's the team.
So I don't know, John. The greys are definitely getting more visible on my hair.
That's why I cut that off.
So the last, I might have to go there. The last 10 years, or the last year, has felt like 10, to be honest. We've had, you talked about doom scrolling. It's been hell. It's been absolute hell. And I know certainly the supply chain are really feeling it. I mean, for you, where has been the key issues? Looking at kind of a quick high level snapshot of them.
Okay. I mean, so I don't want to retread what we've been discussing on conferences for the last couple of years, but it's kind of, I got a graph thrown at me by our chairman, because basically I do a stand up every sort of 6 months about the offshore wind market, and I keep saying next year, but I've been saying that since 22. So the thing for me has been that it's the hiccup that this has been so prolonged. So the macroeconomic, the correction has taken longer than I anticipated. Right. The first thing is the correction has taken longer than I anticipated. Last year, I thought that that the cost of finance would be coming down. Didn't factor in the orange guy, right? And so it's like, one of the issues for me is that it has prolonged, and that's not to say that I don't think that. To me, we're just seeing the sort of the asset. I mean, maybe we should discuss this at one point as well. Is that I liken it to a sort of a bit of an asset bubble that we've had. Yeah. So actually, a lot of what we're feeling is actually the deflation of an asset bubble, a little bit. Painful, especially for people who are losing, people that we know in the industry that are actually, that have lost their jobs, that companies have really hit some hard times and stuff, and that's really, really painful. But I see a lot of solid stuff that we can focus on, because that was not the bubble. That was not that. They were markets with good, solid basis to them. So I think it's the longevity of it a little bit that has surprised. If I go back to the 2023, John, that's been a bit of a surprise. I thought that 25 would be coming out, but now I'm going, well, it's just that. It's like it's always a little bit.
Absolutely. And I suppose the geopolitical side and the politics has really, as you said, you alluded to Mr. Orange out west, my favourite person.
It's like Macbeth. We won't mention.
We won't mention him.
We've just mentioned Macbeth.
But it's the dynamics, and I suppose where it came from, and how we've reacted to it, I think has played into it as well. But I mean, yes, we've had a lot of pain over the last year as well, but there has been some positives, I think, coming out of it. It's been a roller coaster. I was on a funfair, Twizzler, God knows what it was, thing during the summer with my nieces, and I literally feel like I've come off one of those, particularly over the last few weeks with some of the decisions around the environmental permits being pulled in the US.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm disoriented.
He's taken it further. I mean, we all saw the projects getting pushed through federal permitting and leasing to try and get this sort of, to sort of shove into a pump.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All these projects, what about 11 giga? I can't remember the actual gigawatts, but basically all these projects through. And we kind of thought, well, there's not going to be any leasing. There's not going to be much development, but there's some projects here that can, that have the federal permits that can go through to.
Yeah.
And so I bought into that. I bought into that was a bit of a safety net. And then all of a sudden he's doing the 80% a project, 80% complete. Stop.
Yeah.
What?
And a Friday night, not good for our nerves in Europe when you hear that.
The CEO roasted.
Let's put a pin in that one, and we'll talk about that one later in a little bit more depth. But I suppose from a European perspective, we've been on another bit of a roller coaster with auctions, and obviously we have the AR7 auction coming up, AR7 auction round basically for anyone who's not familiar with the terms. It's looking a little bit positive. It's like everyone didn't want to play in the game. We've seen null point come up for Germany. Looking at the European,
Denmark before that.
It's been a hell of a Eurovision, but Denmark before that, and now we've got a little bit more momentum now behind AR7. Or the bidding period has closed as of the end of August, so all eyes on that, and whether we see a result come out in November or is it going to be more later into March. And I suppose really putting...
Should we take bets on the month?
I know.
I'm going to go for January.
I'm hoping maybe after the budget, but let's see. Just after the budget, I think the momentum we could do with some good news.
We could do with it, but it's all down to challenging.
It's
and
down
stuff
to
like
challenging and how we do it. But look, within the auction, I think there's been a lot of positives. You've seen some of the, the rules of monopoly have changed. They have gone
doing it in a different way. They're trying to, there's a whole bunch of things that we know that's going on that they're trying to, get as much on the table as possible.
Yeah.
And I applaud the current government for trying to do that, because we need projects with consents, with CFDs.
Yeah, solid deliverables and ones that can keep our supply chain stable and investing. I think, which is probably one of the key issues. We've got some respite with some of the supply chain issues because the Orange Gentleman has
so we're not going to see some production runs heading across the Atlantic anytime soon. So that will relieve some pressure in the short to medium term.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Did Germany read the room?
Don't think they did. I think they're going to have to go to maybe get out of their bubble and actually have a little look.
Certainly my colleagues I'm not close enough to it, but certainly my colleagues in Germany, it seems to be that the reaction to that was quite quick.
Yeah.
So I think it just demonstrates that it's not as cheap as people think it is.
No.
I don't know how Germany and Denmark got into that sort of position, because it was, the UK showed where things were.
Yeah.
So I think two-sided CFDs ain't perfect, but it's the perfect we've got, or rather progress, not perfection kind of thing. It allows us to progress. We could play about with CFDs and mechanisms till the cows come home.
Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, we need to keep the customers central to this and understanding the pricing. But however we can tweak those models, like the extension of the terms to 20 years has been really important.
Yeah.
And recognizing that, and how do we I know it gets a lot of challenge for, well, this will put cost and bills, but again, it's a confidence in the risk that's been put on some of the bids and the pricing going into these auctions. That back of house calc really needs to be acknowledged and I suppose brought to the forefront a little, to say, well, investors, your cost of your appetite is, and your risk is a little bit moderated, but equally then your risk on delivery is, because you've got that extended 5 years, you've got a little bit more of a cushion to say, okay, we're a little bit more comfortable with that model right now, so we can be a little bit more we have a bit more
lower risk
wiggle.
premium.
Yeah, absolutely. And floating, John, where are we at on that?
I think so I'm doing something just now, and I was talking about so I've got this sort of analogy where and this is very asset bubbly, where we markets looked at the Europe and thought, oh, zero subsidy, offshore wind's cheap. Floating, started, you can Cardans of the world, the wind float Atlantics, gave confidence to markets that was looking at offshore wind, but it didn't have that continental shelves. So all of a sudden, markets were going, this is how we can do offshore wind. So there was all of a sudden there was delegations, right? This kind of thing, and then oil and gas for reasons of doing something in the transition came in, and of course they've got deep pockets, and they see floating as something that is that they understand, and they've got big skill sets and everything. So they came in at the same time, and I just think that to a degree we saw a real bubble in floating. Yeah. So all those charts that have sort of went to the right, I just think that's just like the mist sort of. I must be hungry. Can you pick up my stomach rumbling there? The mist is sort of cleared, and what's left is actually reality. There's markets that are taking it seriously, that have the industrial base and the policies. So you've got the UK, you've got France. I mean, for Japan had a bit of a hiccup, but there's some projects behind it. They've got, I think you've got. What's left is stuff that will happen over the next 10 years. Yeah. Floating will happen. It is different from fixed.
Yeah.
And I think it's it's going to be quite a niche separate thing. So I think that floating is fine. Maybe not if I had a 90 gigawatt portfolio that I'm trying to get rid of, but basically as a market, it's kind of where it probably should have been through all the mist.
Yeah.
And we are moving from pilot to product.
Yep.
Right, and trying to understand what that is, and the Celtic Sea, Intog, ScotWind is all a part of that, and I think that's quite exciting. And again, the industrial, the supply chain side, that's really important for me, because basically we've got a really strong offshore sector. We have had for 40 years anyway. I'd like to see us try and leverage that. So I think that you could look really bad on floating, but I think it's whether you've been burnt or not, to be honest. But I think generally floating is going to progress, and it'll progress at a sensible pace, the pace that it was always going to progress at.
Yeah, I mean, we've been here before with fixed. In the early days, we had Claire Barry put down the gauntlet. I'll never forget it in 2014. By 2016, I think it was January, we were in Glasgow and we got news that we've hit the target, or we've gone below the target of £100 per megawatt hour, which was set for 2020.
Yeah, so exciting. I know.
When our heads are put together and when we are hungry for something, that's when innovation, and that's where our industry steps up to the challenge. We've kind of got a little bit giddy, and it's a case of
we got giddy.
We got giddy,
and I was giddy.
I was giddy. I'll be absolutely fine as well.
I'm not going to pretend I was sitting at the back going.
But we have done this, and this is where, going back to your point about re-engaging the engineers, I think that's so important. We need to cut through, and that's not just the engineers in whether it's subsea or it's looking at the oil and gas side, but it's getting those engineers who also worked in fixed bottom. They're a different breed. We need to bring those two types of structural engineers to the forefront, get the logistics, get the manufacturing in, and go back to basics, get the practicalities. But we're starting to cut through some of the logistical items, and how we continue that, I think, is kind of pretty important.
And a positive thing, actually, a positive angle or a positive spin about what's happened in floating, because actually there could be a point which actually says that we will be further on in 2030 than we would have been if we didn't have the asset bubble. The analogy is that we were years ago, we were laying all these fibre optic cables and stuff, and we all went bust. And there's the analogy for railways that I'll mention later. A whole bunch of we've progressed our thinking about the technology, studies. Looking at kicking the tires of markets and technologies. Would we have done all of that if we hadn't? If that activity had not existed. Yeah. So actually, the chances are we're actually further on. There's been a benefit of that. Yes, there's been a massive downside of that deflation of that, but actually we're probably going to be further ahead than we would have been if that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Which you can counter as a positive.
I mean, you guys have been going for...
I know. I didn't know how to stop.
I was like, I gotta move.
I was also waiting for direction.
Well, I've got some stuff for you. I've got a question for you. playing around.
Breathe there a second, guys.
Yeah, have a drink, and then I'm going to ask you this question.
My knee is buckled.
I know. I'm not going to get up because I'll fall down. I've got 50-year-old knees that have been locked in that position. Right, the question.
So I need you to both answer this one at a
Okay.
time, but I'll go with you, John, first.
Okay.
Make a choice. You have to choose one of the following for the rest of your life. No coffee, no metal music.
Is that the same choice, or is that two separate
That's
choices?
two separate choices, and then the last
Jesus.
one, or drive a gas guzzler for the rest of your life.
So either no coffee and metal or a gas guzzler.
No coffee, no metal, or drive a gas guzzler for the rest of your life.
So if I said no
choices.
coffee,
Coming from the man who had 3 this morning, and I barely.
I know,
I
I
wasn't even in the door.
it's going to have to be no coffee because I ain't driving a gas guzzler for the rest of my life, and I couldn't live without metal. I could survive without coffee because I'd find other sources of caffeine.
There you go, clever.
Clever.
What about you, Una?
Oh, I'm not a metalhead, so
That's an easy one.
This is easy, but if you put it into rock or indie,
Yeah.
It's still. I love my music. And I love my art. I'd probably struggle there. The coffee, I probably could give up coffee. I could get away with a warm drink, but I do like my coffee. But I'm not.
I still
as
think that's a
obsessed.
blasphemous question.
Yeah, it is.
I
It
tried
is.
to make it blasphemous, to be honest.
Yeah,
Sorry about
Jesus.
That's
Yeah.
a horror show.
But that was
It's
way
like-
worse for him. Like I get
Yeah.
over a few then. Like I don't mind walking. How about we round it up on maybe the good old grid and curtailment at the minute? I mean, that has been right across Europe, right across the US. I don't think there's a country not affected by it at the minute. They're very lucky if they aren't. But I mean, where's your head on where the grid is and how much of a factor it has played in the last year or two on projects and delivery of projects?
Well, I think the hockey stick of Scotland was an unnatural hockey stick.
Mm-hmm.
So I think everyone expected then that would layer out once grid connections are coming out, are being given to projects. And that was always going to happen because we weren't going to get, because it wasn't going to be like that because we know the state of our grid. I think, again, the government has taken a grip or attempted a grip to actually look at dealing with it, but it takes time. It takes a huge amount of time. Getting on land connections through permitting, finance, everything else. It takes time, but they're beginning to grip it. And you're right. If you don't have this, you probably don't have much. If you don't have an issue as a market, you're probably just running on diesel or something. So, the problem is it's how we frame it.
Yeah.
Right. So curtailment. Scotland's had 200 billion pounds worth of curtailment last year. Wasted bills and everything else. Actually, it's managing a system. So the downside, the first thing is it's managing a system. It's a large but marginal cost of an entire energy system. Mm-hmm. It's a way of managing it. We want to reduce that, which is what we're doing. It's what the industry is doing. Mm-hmm. It's trying to reduce that. So yes, we need to reduce curtailment, but curtailment is actually one of the tools in the toolbox of managing a grid system. But the problem is it's weaponized, mm-hmm. and it's easily weaponized by actors in politics, etc. So we need to come away. We need to make sure that we've got messaging that basically very simply explains that without going into detail. But also that it's still a cost that we're trying to reduce. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but it's not going to change.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
I wonder.
We need a number of things to happen to help it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I wonder if there's a couple of levers that we could consider within industry, like kind of looking at containment areas and hotspots, basically around that. Is there a way that we could work with our planning system to bring in maybe more planning or locational planning of maybe heavy demand centres?
So I do think that when we lease, we should be taking grid into consideration when we're leasing stuff. I think that you need to look at when you've got you've got leasing, you've got permitting, you've got sort of CFD, FID, grid agreement somewhere back here, the grid availability for COD, etc. The leasing needs to account is that, so if this is going to be, if this 2 gigawatt that I'm wanting to lease, if I'm wanting that online in 10 years, is that, what's the point of doing that in that area, in that sort of area, if the grid's not going to be there? I don't see the point in that.
Yeah.
So I think that we're not joined up enough on leasing. We're looking at spatial and stuff like this, and I just think that we could be looking at supply chain. We could be looking especially at grid to try and reduce some of the potentiality of a couple of projects coming through and going, you're at the end of the queue. What does that mean? That's 5 years on my project. I think we could doing a bit more.
I agree. I think like looking at, say, some of the large energy users who want to get on, like the likes of a data center. I know they have some difficult press.
Yeah, that's true, because that comes in the mix now.
But they're really looking at it's kind of modular, I suppose, infrastructure as well, that they can go up a little bit quicker. And is this an opportunity to have a little bit of a win-win?
Yeah,
it has to be done in collaboration with communities and making sure you're bringing everyone
nothing else
along.
that can come online as quick as renewables.
Exactly.
Full stop period.
And especially if we're getting the curtailment costs and mindful that how do we put it to work and work it, stress test it and work it a little bit harder. And by having a large demand center coming in, there's almost an element of, do we have green energy hubs, taking an infrastructure, stepping back and looking at it from a wider infrastructure
redrawing
planning.
The boundaries I think that's a really interesting thing, is to redraw the boundary and stuff at the moment, rather than generation transmission grid. Right. I think redrawing boundaries, it makes things more complex, but then again also some sources of finance likes complexity, because that's how they leverage stuff. So actually I think that's a really interesting thing to actually sort of play on, is that I hadn't thought about that. There is we're decarbonising of heavy industry, but then we've got this new heavy industry called AI in terms of energy use that's coming in, and they tend to, for it looks like, certainly in the US when we've had a look at, they tend to come in clusters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, which is I'm not totally sure how that comes in clusters, but it's driven by the sort of the tech, the companies, the skills, and everything else, and it's coming online faster than the supply can manage.
Yeah. So
I think that some way of pulling that in, and if you can do that in a way that then maybe attracts this outward investment of data set, of AI data centers, to say, actually, we're going to get all this clean generation through, that allows you to build your data center here.
Exactly, yeah. And
why is Ireland not doing that?
I don't know. That's a very good question. It's certainly a big...
You're in the EU.
Yeah.
Right. It's they can attract US corporations a lot easier than the UK can at the moment.
It's a big point of debate in the Irish market at the minute, and certainly one that needs to come to the forefront. Obviously the LEU side are more to the point, the data centers have been demonized in the press heavily.
Okay.
Probably haven't helped themselves, to be honest. Right. But I think there's an element we need to zoom back, and particularly for US revenue. It looks
a no-brainer.
Scotland looks
but it looks a no-brainer. Ireland looks
good.
like a no-brainer to a Scot who doesn't have that that confluence of EU, market, single market, connectivity, the relationship with the US, the history of tech in Ireland, the wind resource in Ireland. It's almost like it's a prize sitting there to be grabbed. To me, looking on the outside in, it's like, what are you doing?
We've just made hard work of it, unfortunately. This is why getting the policy, regulatory framework, getting people in there who understand the business, the investment. And this is where, I suppose, making sure that your policies aren't out of whack and having that holistic view, that's where it really starts to come together. And it's all well and good having standalone, near perfect policies and great ambition at a higher level, but actually conversion, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And how you keep, and this is a big question for Ireland at the minute, it's balancing that supply and demand. It has a major grid infrastructure problem. It's got a huge...
Wet bits of string down the west coast.
Wet bit, yes, absolutely. Could do with a circular, to be honest, right around it. But it's a case of how do you capture that, natural resource, but how do we be smart about it? Because we shouldn't, as a nation, we should not be where we are right now from a revenue perspective.
Not with what you've got.
when I left, the Tiger was genuflecting. And I remember the minister at the time, Brian Lennon, he's passed away since, he really said this is going to be intergenerational. We are not going to get out of this easy. We managed for some way. You look over to Greece, you look at the pain. I mean, Spain was in a lot of pain before we actually went down and genuflected on the Tiger. And a lot of Spanish companies were actually working on motorways in Ireland. But how have we got ourselves out? I don't think we reflect back. And I'm hoping to go to a lecture actually in Edinburgh in a couple of weeks, just around the economic fall of Ireland back in 2008, 2009. And how we got ourselves out of it. But it goes back to that tech. It was innovative thinking. It was innovative business models. And we've somehow forgotten that, or we've forgotten the war wounds. So bringing that back, and I think Scotland and particularly the UK has a real opportunity to kind of look to its neighbours and go, well, how can we work together? Because we've got a huge industry here around offshore wind. We've got a major industry amongst two well-connected countries, and how do we work collaboratively together to really bring things along?
Success can be a soporific.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, you sort of assume that everything's going to sort of continue, and you forget what got you to that point.
Yeah.
The good thing is, I think that generally, when it comes to countries or groups, is that it's also muscle memory, but you need to unlock the muscle memory. You know what I mean?
Point.
Which is
yeah.
It's one of the annoying things. And I actually did a post on it on LinkedIn this morning. I took a photograph of the Forth Rail Bridge. Right.
Yeah.
One of my sort of analogies is when it really annoys me. Right, Aberdeen. The amount of money that's flown through that's flowed through Aberdeen.
Yeah.
Right, and it's only recently got that bypass. Right, okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, where did this money go? Well, it actually probably we know where it went. It went offshore. But basically, I used to look at sort of the lack of ambition sometimes with infrastructure in the UK and Scotland. So I'm going to narrow it down to Scotland, though it doesn't have all the levers. It's, not everything's in Edinburgh. But basically it's the lack of ambition, because in 1873 or something, there was a horse-drawn carriage with some people with top hats, some gentlemen in top hats turned up on the side of the Forth and looked at and imagined an engineering marvel that for financing at the time would have been a mega project.
Yeah.
With new materials, with brand new design to do something that no engineering feat had actually happened, and they did it. Yeah. And it's like, where's that? And that's got to be a muscle memory.
Yeah.
Right. And but to me, actually, that muscle memory is actually in practice now. We work in an industry, to bring it back, we work in an industry with the biggest rotating equipment, the biggest rotating machinery on the planet, with forces that are quite incredible, sometimes on floating structures moored in potentially up to hundreds of meters, producing clean electricity that comes ashore for people's houses. That is that kind of ambition. So that is the muscle memory going. And I think that goes back to your thing about the engineers, because the people that made the Forth Road, yes, it was financed and stuff, probably didn't need too much permitting, but basically it was engineers. Yeah. And I think that comes full circle to the thing it's about the engineers. But I think that's the muscle memory. We do have it. We need to unlock it. It's like finding it.
Yeah.
We need to find that. But I think offshore wind, we should stand back and go, actually, that is the ambition. That's the railways. This is the railways from the 1860s and stuff. This is the railways of today, is offshore wind.
Yeah.
And that gets me excited. I'm not an engineer. I can't do loads. Right, I can't do that, but I love speaking to people that does.
Yeah.
Right, I love being surrounded by fantastic engineers and stuff like this, and learning and stuff, and that's why we're doing this.
Okay, I think we've been chatting quite a bit today, so we might call it to a close. But I think there's only one person who can sign this off, and it needs to be a metalhead. And John, what have you got to say for us?
Really enjoyed our first podcast. So until next time, keep the head banging, keep the rotor spinning, and keep revolting. This is the Revolting Podcast, and it's goodbye from me
and Una.
Until next time.
Woo!
Well done, guys.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that was a bit cheesy.
It was. It was the two Ronnies. It was the two Ronnies bit. It's a good night from me and it's a good night from him.